One of the secrets to great writing is laziness. My job in this video is to prove it to you. You can write lazier with more impact to your audience by using something called a metaphorical universe. A metaphorical universe is using related imagery to build cohesion and expand the meaning of your words. Even my definition there feels a little bit jargony, so let me try to explain this a little bit simpler. A problem that I see a lot in poetry and songs especially, but also in novel writing, is mixing up metaphorical universes. Doing this can make it hard to buy into the story. It can lead to a kind of whiplash in the brain. Now, what I mean by that is like in a poem that I was editing once, there was language of water and rivers and bridges and this scenic stuff. And then all of a sudden, near the end, we get this image of a stoplight. That stoplight does not feel like it belongs in the same universe as the water, even though in our real world there can be a stoplight leading to the bridge to go over the water. Our brain still gets confused by these mixed metaphors. And note that neither of these is a bad image for wanting love. Bridge, water, all of that is used to describe love a lot. Stoplight, city imagery, all of that is also a really good image for love. But when we mix them, we end up confusing our listener or our reader more than we end up supporting them in the process. The solution is to choose metaphors and imagery that belong together. That not only then do you have this cohesive whole with the bridge over the water, with the river, all of that, it also creates something bigger than the sum of its parts because we've then created this whole world in the mind of our reader or our listener that helps them feel like the story is important and meaningful. And that is some of the biggest work that you can do in your writing that has the biggest impact with the least amount of work. We're going to look at 3 examples from songs first before talking about how to apply it to novels briefly at the end. The first example I'm going to show you is mostly really well done when it comes to the metaphorical world. The second one I think is brilliant. The third one I think needs work. We're going to talk through each of these examples and then do our best to fix the metaphorical world of the third one to make it a little bit more meaningful. And because I am me, we're going to talk about Taylor Swift first in the first 2 songs. High Infidelity, I feel like, is really slept on as a song, and part of that is because of the metaphorical world that it creates. It plays on this idea of high treason. By calling it high infidelity, we then call into that mind this idea of a crime. But at the same time, high fidelity is a music term, it's a sound. And when Taylor wrote this, I imagine that she sat down and she came up with this idea of high treason. Oh, wait, high infidelity. Oh, wait, that sounds like high fidelity, or perhaps the other way around. And then used that to build up the world of her chorus in particular around music. Let's take a look. High infidelity, put on your records and regret me. I bent the truth too far tonight. I was dancing around it. Or this time, I don't remember, whatever. High infidelity, put on your headphones and burn my city. Your picket fence as sharp as knives. I was dancing around it. This is the chorus, most of the song. And we have this idea of putting on your records and regretting this mistake. Part of what I find really interesting about this is records obviously can refer to vinyls, but it can also be a way of talking about your memories. You can look at your diary, and that can be looking at your records and regretting what you did there. I like the idea of bending the truth because, especially in context with records, you can bend notes when you're DJing and you get this idea of dancing around it, but it means so much more because it is in this universe of music. We then talk about putting on your headphones and burning my city, which I love because city, the way that she says it, almost sounds like CD, and burning CDs has a very different meaning in terms of creating music, which is often a thing that romantic partners would do back in ye olden days of the 90s and early 2000s. It's this line, your picket fence is sharp as knives, that I feel like pulls us out of the universe of music a little bit. Now, that image of the picket fence being sharp as knives is really beautifully done in terms of the rest of the song when we're talking about a marriage being really boring and stifling for the narrator of the song and wanting out of that and getting out of it with infidelity. But it doesn't tie into music at all. And whenever I listen to it, it just throws me out of this world just a little bit. Now we're going to try to manifest Reputation Taylor's version with Getaway Car, which I think is one of the best songs that she's ever written, especially through the lens of a metaphorical world. In Getaway Car, we are talking about a heist. And I can't even put all of the words that relate to a heist into it because it's the entire song. She never really breaks this. What we start out, it was the best of times, the worst of crimes. She's pulling us into a dramatic story with a really, really famous line, but then changing it into crimes and talking about it in that light. Then in the chorus, we get riding in the getaway car. There were sirens in the beat of your heart. And what I wanted to point out in that line in particular is that she's using the language of a heist. She's using the language of a crime to talk about what his heartbeat was like. We aren't just telling a story in the world of a heist, but she's using a metaphor that relates to the world of heist in order to pull us deeper in. Then we go on into the next verse. It was the great escape, the prison break, the light of freedom on my face, talking about getting away from a relationship that feels like a prison. There was freedom, but this freedom she found doesn't work because it was a getaway car. It was a crime. It was never meant to last. We were jet set Bonnie and Clyde until I switched to the other side. She goes on to talk about like taking a bag of money and stealing the keys to the getaway car, and that's how the song ends. This whole song combines really two images. The main metaphorical universe is that of a heist, and then at the same time we have this idea of a grand story. We do it with the best of times, worst of crimes, opening us up for a story. She then talks about, I knew it from the first old-fashioned, we were cursed, which I didn't realize was referring to the drink. To it, I put the comma in the wrong spot. I knew it from the first. I knew it from the beginning. It's an old-fashioned we were cursed, like a storytelling, old-fashioned idea of being cursed and we're never going to work out. And then we go through all of these different metaphors that relate to the storytelling and the heist so that we get an even grander world of this was an epic story and it was never going to work out because we were the bad guys the whole time, which I just think is brilliant. And now we're going to move on from Taylor Swift to a song that is really, really, really popular and well done in so many ways, but also gets made fun of a lot for messing up the metaphorical universe. I do think that yes, you can get away with not doing this. You can get away with mixing metaphors, you can get away with a lot of things, but getting away with them I don't think is good enough. And nobody is ever going to be like, you know what, I wish that Getaway Car had some more mixed metaphors that didn't make sense in the story of the heist. Like nobody's going to ask you to do things worse, so you may as well do them good the first time. So this successful song that I think mixes metaphors horribly is Firework by Katy Perry. Well, sung by Katy Perry. It's a Max Martin song. He knows so much about writing music that works that I really respect. This one, however, gets made fun of so much for that "Do you feel like a plastic bag" line. Let's go ahead and look at it though. Do you ever feel like a plastic bag drifting through the wind wanting to start again? Do you ever feel so paper thin like a house of cards, one blow from caving in? Do you ever feel already buried deep, 6 feet under screams, but no one seems to hear a thing? Did you know that there's still a chance for you because there's a spark in you? And then it goes on to say, ignite the light and let it shine, and own the night like it's the 4th of July because baby, you're a firework. And there's a lot of good bones here. Obviously, the song speaks to a lot of people. It has this kind of uplifting, hopeful message of self-empowerment, and it's fine. But let's look at some of the reasons why there are issues here with the metaphorical universe. We have this imagery of being drifting through the wind, and then a house of cards that's trying to withstand the wind, and then death. Then we also have this idea of being paper or garbage or plastic. And I kind of like the transition from plastic bag to paper thin. It falls apart so thoroughly that we lose any appreciation that we could have had for the plastic bag paper thin transition. So I'm going to focus on this idea of, do you ever feel useless? A bonus as I'm trying to rewrite this is right now the plastic bag and the house of cards and coffins really have nothing to do with being a firework. I kind of want to bridge the gap so that being a firework is surprising but inevitable. That is the goal. And I did say that this is writing lazier, and I do think it is in a lot of ways because you can build a world of metaphor when you just sit down and think of, okay, what are the things related to this idea? What are the things I want to say? How can I pull from the things on the metaphorical list in order to make my song stronger? But there is some hard work that goes into it. And I tried. I don't think that this is ideal, but let's see. So the universe I decided on is paper that can be set on fire, because then there's still the spark in you that can ignite, right? I wanted to keep as much of the original as possible when doing this, including as much of the rhyme scheme as I could, as much of the rhythm as I could. And the line I really like about paper thin like a house of cards will blow from caving in. And I liked the idea of, do you feel listless? Do you feel like you're drifting through the world? But I wanted to tie it into paper a little bit more. And so what I settled on is, do you ever feel discarded from the world, a crumbled up receipt with no chance to begin? Do you ever feel already buried deep among the useless things that no one took the chance to keep? And it makes you feel so paper thin, like a house of cards that's just one blow from caving in. Did you know that there's still a chance for you because there's a spark in you? So I want to talk through what I did here because I do feel like it's a little bit odd that I moved already buried deep earlier. I moved paper thin later. The reason I did that was because I wanted to build a world. I'm a crumbled up receipt. I've been discarded into a garbage can that's already buried deep among useless things that nobody kept, without saying trash can. And receipts are paper thin, but I really liked this image. I kept it for now. I'm not sure I would on another rewrite. Honestly, I did this in about 10 minutes just to get an idea from it. But I felt like this is the order that I needed things in. I was discarded, I was buried, I feel paper thin, and I'm about to give up, but there's a spark in me, and because I'm inside of a garbage can, if it ignites, the whole thing's going to light on fire like a firework. So some of the words here I ended up adding just because I wanted to keep the melody repeats from here to here, and then it gets a little bit bigger here, and then it gets smaller here. So I wanted to match that rhythm still so we could keep everything else the same. But I promised you a little bit on novels. So what about novels? What I have done that I think works really well is talking about metaphors in relationship to the character, specifically the point of view character in the scenes that you're writing. When I went through and wrote a book with 4 points of view, I did this work for the first time. I wanted to make sure that I could distinguish the 4 points of view, and one of the ways that I did it was with metaphors. I had a musician and an actor and a YouTube influencer, and those three would use very different metaphors. One talks about like cameras and photography and social media. And another one talks about music and recording as part of their metaphors, and so on, so that the metaphors reflect what the characters are like. And then beyond just work of who the character is and what they would say, what metaphors can you use that tie into your theme? How can you describe things in a way that lends itself to what you want people to come away with from your story? What can tie into your world building? But even more simply than that, I'm not going to use a metaphor that has anything to do with electrical engineering because I know nothing about electrical engineering. My husband is never going to use a metaphor that has to do with gymnastics because he doesn't understand it like I do. I would use a metaphor that has to do with gymnastics. Both of us, however, might use a metaphor that has to do with gaming or role playing or stories. Even though I don't play D&D, I love the metaphors that come with it. And so, like, we can talk about roll for initiative with chores in our family household because it's a shared metaphor. And using that is going to not only make your characters feel more real and build your world in a way that makes it deeper, but it's going to create something that feels bigger than the sum of its parts because these metaphors tie in to specific things at specific times that your characters feel like real people. And it makes the writing easier for you because you only have to learn the metaphors that your characters would know, and you can build them deeply rather than wide. That's all I have for you about metaphors and writing lazy in a way that makes you seem smart. If you like videos like this, make sure to give it a like. Drop a comment below about your favorite metaphors and songs that build across the whole thing, and let me know what you're working on, and I will see you soon.